So Peter, is it like for most people, like me, there's all this stuff happening, but there's like a filter that it's that it seems to be experienced through, like the filter of me.
It's not experienced through that, but the filter, the way you're describing it, becomes a point of obsession, a point of focus. So the field of experience is infinitely vast and includes all sorts of different flavors and dimensions and textures. But the what you're calling a filter zeroes in and focuses in on a certain partialization of that, which then becomes what is largely noticed. All the other dimensions and aspects are actually present, but they're not being noticed. They are being perceived, but they're not being acknowledged. It's a kind of a denial or a self-censorship. It's basically a hypnotic mechanism. So it's not, the filter doesn't actually block anything out. It just, it sort of enforces a focus that partializes something that is much vaster than that and includes much more than is included or is emphasized within the focus. And this is the great, the wonderful ease of noticing is all of these other aspects are actually present and are actually being experienced. So it's relatively easy to switch gears, so to speak, and open to these relatively non-normal modes, because they are in fact present.
They're just very subtle.
They may or may not be subtle, but they're just not being emphasized in the context of normalcy, because normalcy is very demanding. It insists on being in the focus, so to speak.
And in your experience, all of the different modes and aspects and dimensions are present at the same time?
Yes, they are in yours too. In everyone's experience they are. But they may or may not be being acknowledged. They may or may not be being emphasized. But this is the case with the normal human mode, or with any human mode. The tendency is of the attention, or the point of the focus of attention, just sort of dance around and move around. In the case of a yogi or a person with some realization, there's there's an explicitly much broader range of flavors that can come into focus. Whereas in the case of a person who is more addicted to a kind of a normalcy or a sense, a scaled down focus, then these other modes, even though they're present, are generally not acknowledged.
Can we talk about this this focus of me as being an addiction? That's like the primary addiction.
You can call it that if you wish.
Well, you're calling it a point of fixation, or?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it. You can't make sense of it. So calling it an addiction doesn't explain it. It's an irrational, unfathomable fact that it seems to be the way it seems to be, and it is also a fact that there are alternatives simultaneously present and available if one has the wherewithal to avail oneself of that. And that's really the trick is to notice that these other, alternative flavors and textures are in fact available. And it's not mutually exclusive. It's not like you need to stop your normalcy or stop your fixation on self or personality or whatever to get to these modes, because they're not mutually exclusive. It's not an either or. These other modes are present, and they are relatively less self-oriented or less human normalcy oriented. And that's that's there.
In your experiences, is there like the Peter Brown character that's playing in this narrative, and then there's all of this other stuff beyond that, and that's just like some small portion of.
Sure, you could say that.
Yeah. But
And I think that's the case for human consciousness in general. But again, in the case of a non-yogi, the being may not be aware of the breadth of the range of the experiential qualities that are actually present and available, because of the tendency to so heavy-handedly fixate and focus on a narrow range of that. Which kind of more or less defines or is defined by consensus reality. Or something like that. If there wasn't a consensus reality.
Yeah, it's actually, well, I think that's true, I suppose, for, sort of the beginning, but I mean, as I do more and more noticing, the demarcation between the big me and the little me seems to melt.
Yeah, well, it's arbitrary, exactly. It's like, well, I can look over here, or I can look over here. There's no demarcation. It's really just a matter of.
Yeah, because there's a lot of other things to be looking at.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And so really it's just a matter of where you're looking, rather than there being some boundary that forces you to look here and you can't get out of the boundary. It's not like that. It's a matter of, this kind of filtration or filter of self, or normal humancy or small self, or whatever you want to call it, is not anything that has any enforcement. It's voluntary. It's created by the more or less deliberate fixation upon it.
So it's well, I had a very good friend. I was on my way to go up to British Columbia actually on Friday to say goodbye to him, because he's dying of leukemia. Well, I didn't make it. He died yesterday. But so when things like that happen, it's such a shock that I just immediately go back into that focus, narrow,
Sure.
Well,
it's a knee-jerk reaction. It's familiar ground.
Yeah.
And we all have a history typically of being, heavily indoctrinated that is who you are, and that's normalcy, and that's your life.
Yeah, yeah. But on the other hand, I think some of the chops that I have help me navigate. It was sort of like just sort of looking at the shock and awe of what's happened, or what I thought happened.
Yeah, sure.
And just looking at all the thoughts and all the memories, and that came forth, just looking at them as
sure. Yeah,
kaleidoscope.
Yeah,
almost.
that's a good way to put it. Is when you practice yoga, you build up chops. You build up the ability to be with your experience in a much broader range of modes,
right,
than the historical habitual normalcy mode, and that becomes explicit. I mean, you actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't particularly do it on purpose. I mean,
No.
I just sort of, I mean, it's sort of,
Well, it becomes the new normal, having a multi-dimensional
right.
access to your experience becomes more of the new normal as one
In fact, if
develops.
I
and
tried, I mean, if I tried something like that, it sort of like makes me laugh about that meditation that we did one time in Joshua Tree, and you were saying, well, let go, when people tell me, someone told me yesterday to let it go.
Yeah.
I said, fuck you.
Yeah,
But it was also, then you added, it was so funny, you said, well, let go of letting go.
Yeah,
I
Let
think
go of letting
it's
go.
two sides of the,
Well, that's the real letting go.
yeah, that was.
Or technical terms, lighten the fuck up.
Right.
Light the fuck up is actually more accurate because
Yeah.
there's actually nothing to it.
Well, of course.
Right. Well, I know, that's why I would say those two together sort of balance out to zero.
Yeah, everything seems to just, it doesn't really seem to matter what mode or state or, what's going on. Everything seems to just have more and more. It's kind of like a little shine of infinity or something.
Yeah, and that's the actual condition. There is no mode. There's an infinity of implicative modes that seem to be something, and you look at them and they aren't really anything. It's just a seeming that flitters off and becomes something else in the next instant, or what have you. I mean, you can't actually describe it, of course.
Well, it seems like it doesn't even seem like worth trying to change a thing. Not that you even could.
Well, it's impossible.
Yeah. So it's like, all that energy to, I don't know, do any particular thing just seems to be like, it's like there's no point. It's already kind of beautiful in its way.
Yeah, it's already infinite.
Yeah.
It's already, infinite dimensional. It doesn't need to be made anything or opened or closed or steered to or not steered to, because none of those, assertions actually indicate anything whatsoever. It's always just this, exactly the way it is. And the point is to notice that way, this way that it is, of this infinite open dimensionality.
Right. There seems to be this, like when I find that there is some kind of doing going on, some sort of whatever, trying to get something done or avoid something, there's this funny quality of it just becoming, it becomes itself in a way, it becomes the other side of itself, and it's just, there's this kind of wonderful pointlessness to it. It's kind of funny. It's humorous,
Yeah, that's interesting you say that.
Yeah.
I've read that someplace, I think it was in Golden Letters, where he talks about it. You notice that, and then you just like the thought recognizes that it's a thought, and it's like seeing your face up, recognizing yourself in the mirror. Once it sees it, it's unraveled instantaneously, and it has a nice quality to it.
If there's a difficulty with lightening up, it's because there's this belief in a self, a character which is seemingly a real character, which has bad things that could happen to it, and
Sure. That can all be summed up under the notion of self-importance. But again, the antidote is always look at what this actually is. Look at what your experience actually is, and you will notice that it is not that way. It is more ways than the ways that feed self-importance, and so the self-importance dissipates or recedes as relevant. The more clearly you notice what experience actually is, because the nature of what is here does not support self-importance.
Not for long.
Well, if you look, it doesn't. It just doesn't.
Well, so like today it was, I was at home and trying to do a bit of work and having certain anxiousness about that, and not being able to do that work, and thinking, oh, it's a problem with the body or a problem with the mind or something like that, or a spiritual problem, right? And there's always this fixation on myself, but at the same time, like kind of a useless fixation.
Well, it's not important. Those are all just autonomous mechanisms, energy mechanisms, but they exist in a reality that consists of infinite other energy mechanisms that are other than that. So it doesn't matter that is present or not, because it's not anything. It doesn't have a privileged position. It doesn't have a privileged importance to it. So your personality can be present, and its neurotic worrying about things can be present, and its concern about whatever, and hopes and fears and the whole deal. But all of that, it's not, the point isn't about stopping that or correcting that. The point is noticing that doesn't matter, because those are, it's a fart in a hurricane. It's a tiny little energy event in a vast sea of other energy events, none of which have anything to do with that. That's a technical one.
Well, that's what, for me, that was the great forgiveness, was when I was in angst, I realized that it was nothing but this.
Yeah, the great forgiveness is that you don't need to forgive it because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's quite, yeah.
It doesn't need to not be what it is. It doesn't need to be different than what it is, because it's not anything in particular. And it's lost in the sauce, basically, if you look at what's actually present. There's this experience is literally just this vast sea of these whirling vortices of quality and texture and implication. And anything that you can zone in on, like your personality, your circumstances, or anything like that, is some tiny little subsystem down here in the corner or whatever. It doesn't matter whether it's there or not, or what it's doing. It does not have a privileged position.
But it seems like it's at the center of everything.
Everything's at the center of everything.
And like it's the first.
There's no center. Everything is at the center. The center is where you look. So if you don't want it to be at the center, look somewhere else. My thumb's at the center of everything. My thumb's at the center. Everywhere I look, I see my thumb. I'm going like. It's only at the center of everything because you're making it that way by looking at it. And you don't even need to not look at it, because even if I look at my thumb's at the center of everything, but then what's over here, what's here, what's here, what's here, what's here, that's not thumb. It's all of this is non-thumb, and it's present.
This isn't thumb either.
Well, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. You have to.
That's the second semester.
You have to pay for the second lesson to get to that.
So like sound waves, they can be at the center.
Anything can. Anything. A dream, a fantasy, an inspiration, a flash. Anything can be at the center of anything. And you see, the other thing is that if you actually look at your experience, it's continually dancing around and dancing around to all of these different qualities, most of which are ephemeral and have nothing to do with anything. you feel an itch, or you hear a sound, or you have a memory, or some association or something, and it's all just these dancing around little flashes. But then the mind sort of ignores all that and goes to its narrative of, oh, but I'm sitting here in this room with all these people, and which doesn't negate all of that dancing around, doesn't negate all that variety, which is vastly more and other than sitting in a room with a bunch of people. In the context of all this dancing around, there's no room and no people.
But it's not just every point of focus is a center, or that's.
It may seem to be, but no, there is no center. Nothing is a center. Here, if you want to do some research, look at what focus is. Look for yourself at what focus is. It's very clear and explicit. It's easy to look at. But it's not what you think it is. Focus doesn't create anything. Just because you happen to be looking at something doesn't make it important. Just because you happen to be focused on something doesn't give it any priority. But it seems to, perhaps.
Is the focus like an attitude or a stance, or? It
doesn't matter. Just look and see for yourself. There's no point trying to verbalize it. It's not a verbal phenomenon. The nature of this is it seems to generate focus spontaneously and more or less dynamically. But that is in a context that doesn't change what it is, and is a context, the vast majority of which is other than focus. Focus doesn't create a privileged, mandala or a privileged orientational framework.
I caught my mind doing that. Feel something strongly and like that or whatever it is, and then tell myself, well, I need to look somewhere else because this is real. And then my mind goes, well, it must be important because I'm looking at it so hard. That tells me that. I can't say that. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
It's the looking that makes it seem important.
But there is some strong energy that comes up.
There's nothing but strong energy. Anywhere you look, you will find strong energy.
They don't all grip you.
Well, but that's just the nature of your karmic, process at the instant. You have a particular flavor, call it an energy nature, or I don't know what. I mean, you can't define it. And its inclination is to have a certain process which includes a kind of obsessive nature with regards to certain apparent energy aspects at certain apparent times, and so on and so forth, and that all of which has an inherent motivation to do itself. And it's unique to you. What you are obsessed about is not going to be what someone else is obsessed about, or not in the same way. Yeah, clearly. That is not a sign of importance. That's just a sign of that's just a symptom of the fact that you're you. But you are you. It's a kind of a bias within a vastness which transcends that bias. So the bias is is you, and is a strong part of what you are, and is a very explicit part of what you are because it makes itself known and obvious. But that's like a dynamic aspect of a context which vastly transcends that without needing to negate it.
So sometimes I'm on that kind of strong magnetic thing.
Sure.
And I think, okay, if I look somewhere else, I'll find that strength somewhere else. But I typically won't.
Right.
Because like what you're saying, it's not.
Yeah, it's not on your radar.
So then I get confused. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm not really noticing this like I think I am, because I don't feel that same whoosh that coming at me where, I seem to be missing it.
But yeah, so in that case, what I would recommend is notice the difference between the woof and the non-woof, and notice that they're actually degrees of the same thing.
All right.
So even when you go to something that doesn't seem to have any charge, it actually has as much energy as what does seem to have the charge. The charge is just a particular sort of a personalization of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay, because it feels like so still. I can't find that, you just say it has as much,
Exactly,
I'll
no,
keep
I understand,
looking,
yeah.
but.
And most, or let's say much of the energy spectrum, let's say, is going to be in that category. Much of the energy spectrum is not going to be particularly interesting to you at any given time because of whatever your current obsession happens to be, or focus, whatever, however you want to try and define it. But you can play with that and you can notice that. And just because something doesn't seem to have a charge doesn't make it actually any less potent or valuable than what does seem to have a charge, which doesn't make it any more valuable or potent. And you can kind of explore that. So the nature of this charge is kind of value added. It's not actually inherent in the phenomena, but you kind of bring it, or the obsession is what brings it, which is just the arbitrary nature of your process at that particular
I was
point
just
in
thinking
unfoldment.
about sound, how we can't hear lots of sounds that are out there. Is it kind of like that?
Yeah.
It's there, but I don't know.
Well, this doesn't mean, no, this is not so much analogous to that. It's not, that doesn't mean you can't hear it.
Okay.
It just means you're not interested.
Am I ever gonna be interested?
You
No,
might,
really.
you might because,
Like this table, okay, right now. It's just-
but it depends very much on your nature and your process, which can and will evolve and change. But it's unpredictable from the outside what that's going to look like. I mean, some people are more, by their very nature, are more obsessive and targeted and, specialists by nature, and other people are perhaps more broad spectrum. And that's, which again might or might not change over time or what have you. But the important point is to look at that phenomena. It doesn't inhere in what's here. It inheres. It's its own thing. So you're bringing the value through your obsession rather than having the value be in the object itself. And so look and see the way in which the objects are essentially arbitrary, even if you have a particularly obsessive nature in the moment that is really lighting up some particular vector.
Okay, good.
But you can play with that. I mean, that's really good. I mean, it's a very good point.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, find out something that's present that you don't care or have any interest in, and something that is present, something else that's present that you do care about and have a lot of interest in. And then you can find gradations. Maybe you find something that you have a little interest in and don't, but then maybe care about a little bit, and sort of try and find the bell curve. And then you can kind of trace the bell curve and look down, not to completely neutral, but mostly neutral, and then sort of ride it back up and try and find the common denominator of all of it.
And see also that they're all related.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it's gradation, it's not the.
Yeah, exactly. Find out the common denominator. Find out the way it's all the same. You're already an expert in the way it's different. This matters, and none of the rest of it does. You already know that. So now find out the sort of the other side of that coin.
It's kind of weird. I think I'm losing interest in being interested.
Yeah, well, you get to a certain point that can happen, and again, it depends on your process and where you are in your unfoldment and so on and so forth. Everyone's unique.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because like even the idea of attention is like to explore it. It's like, okay, I've done that. It goes absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, but you may have a memory of a time when it was more important to you, and you were more obsessed with it or something.
Maybe so. It's kind of like these. I'm losing my memories too.
Sure, but again, that can be a natural part of unfoldment. You reach a certain point where it's all vanilla. It has to be more and more all vanilla. You still may have echoes of your former viruses. No, it is, because you get to enjoy the richness of everything everywhere, rather than needing to find just that, because that's where the only place you can find richness.
It's almost there's this like opposite of attention. There's like this echo of what's not seen.
Mhm.
It's kind of everywhere, just kind of like
Yeah.
floating.
Yeah, and that's what I recommend for Nancy to look for, because it is everywhere. And the more clearly you see it and understand that it's everywhere, then the more you have access to that palpably. I mean, this is the nature of the yoga. When one develops skill, when one is a more evolved yogi, then one settles into more and more into the field, and less into these obsessive specializations.
Well, it sure doesn't feel like skill to me. It feels
No.
more like,
Well, it's a way of putting it.
no,
The skill in yoga is developing, not giving a shit. Which you may say it isn't skill, but
Yeah, it's like,
still in all, if you haven't developed that skill, it can seem like a hell of a skill because you don't know how to do it.
there was a time when things would come up and I would do sort of some kinds of antidotes or look over here and do this. And at a certain point, there was like this little wave of energy that I was pulling that wave up. So then I said, go do that. I was pushed into it. I said, yeah, go ahead and do that. As soon as I did, the wave drops away, and then the whole thing is now level.
Yeah.
And so the antidote was the anti-antidote. It's just like, don't do any fuck it, screw it.
Yeah.
You're looking at it, well, forget it. Just go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
And then there's nobody pulling the other way anymore. You're not creating the tugging and pulling anymore.
Yeah, mattering and importance is a very subtle circuitry that includes not just importance, but also includes a certain kind of a resistance in there somewhere.
Yes.
And exactly the way that works, it can't be probably deconstructed linearly.
Yeah.
But again, the trick is just to like saying like fuck it or chill the fuck out or so what.
Go ahead and do that.
Yeah, just do that. It doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I mean, any of those.
It's just that the recognition too.
It kills. You're not fighting the obsession,
Right.
but you're also not fighting the resistance. You're
Right.
sort of all of a sudden, instead of playing one side or the other, you sort of are playing both sides simultaneously, and so the tension between them, which is what energizes it, just dissipates.
Yeah, and then after a while.
I mean, you can't say specifically exactly what that means or what that is, but it's kind of like that somehow.
Yeah, so it goes through a stage where that goes on for a while. Pretty soon those level out. They're not there anymore.
Yeah.
They just resolve themselves before they even start.
Yeah.
It's not even like we talked about liking what you don't like, that we actually like what we think we don't like.
Yeah, I mean, this is analogous,
Same
absolutely.
thing,
Yeah. We like what we like and we don't like what we don't like, but we actually like not liking what we don't like.
Yeah.
And it's all an internal game somehow that's played within it, that our energy system is playing with itself in an actual neutrality that contains all of these flavors, and we play a game of attraction and aversion,
Yeah.
But it's all kind of made up. It doesn't actually inhere in the phenomenon. It inheres in the orientation.
Noticing there's like it's kind of more of an energetic thing, whatever. So there's like bands of energy it's kind of like a highway that appears and you can get on and ride. And I started to notice this maybe like a few years ago in dreaming. And realize I'm dreaming and I start flying.
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways to do that. We'd be, just kind of just like being swept up by like a wind.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like the Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the kind of puppet or levitating.
Mm-hmm.
So there seem to be these like an invitation to hook into something, to ride something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. You had an experience like that, or say more to that?
It can seem like that, but again, there's all of these different, apparent modes of relating to energy, and none of them are what they seem, because they're all actually the same thing, exactly. And yet, superficially, they can seem to present as if they're, biased in terms of an invitation where the energy is dominant, or will is dominant. I mean, it sort of can emphasize sort of selfness or otherness or action or non-action or what have you. But in actuality, those are all, that's kind of a glamour in a way. That's kind of a, the word I usually go to is a seeming. You know, all of these energy presences by their very nature, particularly in the context of your, we call it your karmic process or your particular energy nature as the being that you are, will tend to generate or show up as these seemings, where there seems to be a certain way. It's an aspect of energy that it does that. You know, energy has intelligence, it has vitality, it's not just an inert mechanical phenomenon. It's playful, it's manipulative, it's tricky. Like in mythology, the old trickster gods and things like that. That's is all indicating this phenomena where the energy is subtly manipulative, just in its very nature. So these seemings are aspects of that. Or like in Hinduism, the whole notion of Maya is essentially the same thing. So these seemings aren't particularly important. And our tendency is to, our habit is from the normal human mode is to give the seemings top priority because that's what we think it is going on. That's how we try to, develop formulae of taking advantage of our circumstances to improve ourselves or to get what we want or what have you. But all of that is actually an elaborate self-deception. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is the emphasis of importance is actually on the energy, not on the seemings that it seems to present as. It's a little bit analogous to what I was talking about with Nancy, with there's the sort of the self-importance aspect of what you're attributing to be there versus the sort of the actual just objective fact of what is actually there.
So like the same thing is happening in the dream as in, let's say I'm in my kitchen and I feel drawn to make myself a cup of tea.
Right. So whether or not you make the cup of tea doesn't matter. Whether or not you feel drawn doesn't matter. It's like, or to go back to the analogy of the dream with flying, what matters is not what happens in the dream, but that you're dreaming. It's the dreaming that is the important thing and the interesting thing and the powerful thing, not what seems to be happening. Not whether you're flying or not flying, or how you do it or how you don't do it, or whether you're trying to fly or not flying. All the narration of event is all beside the point. It's all seeming. It's what that is actually made of, so to speak, is what's actually happening. That's where the power is. That's where the liberation is found.
Yeah, I catch myself questioning sometimes, like I was watching some memories and they weren't my memories. I don't know. But they, the dream, I interpreted them as memories, and I asked myself, well, where's the camera that took these pictures? Which is kind of another way of asking who's doing the looking. What is doing this? What's generating this?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what you're saying is what this is about, like this yoga.
Yeah, in a way, the phenomena of memory is what's important, not what the particular memory happens to be.
Yeah.
It's the thing itself that is important. And, our habit as humans and our inclination is to not give that any importance and give much more importance to what the memory is, or this, we go to the story right away. And so this is the opposite of that. Regardless of the story, regardless of what seems to be happening or not happening, what then? What's the context that all of that is happening in or not?
So what's the important part in waking life and non-thinking, but just doing? Is it doing? Is it? What's the?
No, doing has no importance. There's no such thing. Energy presence. Radiant presence is the only thing that's ever important. And it's not just in waking life. It's in any mode of reality.
Right, but like, so I understand what I'm looking, with thought, thinking is the important thing, not the thought itself.
Just call it textural presence.
So just textual presence.
Textural presence.
So acting.
Forget about nouns and noun or verb, just
Just
textual presence,
right.
which includes any action that may or may not be present, and includes any substance that may or may not be present. Just the texture. Just undercut all of that elaboration and all that hair splitting, and just go to, what is this?
Yeah.
Feel this. And then it may be action, it may not, it may be this, it may not. Doesn't matter, just feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Feel what is here. And then you undercut all that elaboration, and you get down to the basics, down to the fact of the presence. Because all the rest of it is just glamour. It's just seeming. It's like when you're dreaming, the important thing is you're dreaming, not what the dream is.
Right.
Not even that you're dreaming. Just dream presence. Yeah. I mean, you can approach waking life like you're dreaming. Dream. And don't worry about what's happening or not. And it's not a matter of trying to suppress that or to not participate in it. There's nothing wrong with the action, because that's just more dreaming. The dreaming can look like that. It can look like participation. It can look like obsession. It can look like being analytical. So it's not a matter of trying to suppress that or get away from that. There's no opposites here. The yoga is not the opposite of anything. It allows and includes everything. So yeah, be obsessive and be analytical and be this and be that. But then, what is it?
It's the texture.
Yeah.
Or just dreaming. I like dreaming.
It doesn't matter. I mean, these are all just tricks. It isn't actually that. It isn't actually anything.
Right.
But it's not nothing. It's definitely not nothing in any simple sense. So check out that.
It's like you just given a hypnotic suggestion.
Who was told for dreaming?
Hey, I am awake.
That's
The
right.
First time ever that I've lasted this long.
I'm very surprised to see that.
It's an illusion.
Or maybe you're asleep and you're dreaming all this. When I try to reflect on that texture and that sensation of that, it's like just trying to speak it in words is almost like prior to. It's like the center of the light coming before the thoughts and the interpretations happen. It's right
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
And it's the real profound expanse of it, but there's no words at that point. And then all of the sense of what happened is already after looking back at the trail of what happened.
Yeah.
And we're most of us spend our lives on that trail, looking at what happened, thinking about what happened, instead of seeing what's going on in that moment, which then disappears instantaneously. Something else is in this place.
I was just reading about somebody who studies Halley's Comet. He's seen it once, but he's been studying it every time we go through the tail. It persists and persists, even though you're not there at the center.
Yeah.
But it also seems to be sort of simultaneous. I mean, you describe sort of two different things, but in a way,
Yeah, but they're the same.
it's
yeah.
sort of the same
Yeah.
thing happening.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The words don't.
Yeah, all right,
It's
well,
just
we're
that
trying.
when you get there, it's like,
Yeah.
oh. And then all the rest of it drops away. All the pathways,
Yeah.
all the track, all the yoga, all these words go out, and you just know that this is it, and there's nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
And then it's just so obvious.
Yeah, I mean, a way to put all that, this includes all of its apparent partialities, but it is completely not limited by them. There's no tension whatsoever between the partialities that seem to be the way it is and the way it actually is, which is not limited to actually being that. It's one and the same thing, even though it can seem infinitely different.
What's generating partiality essentially?
Yeah, it generates them, it includes them, it is the substance and motive of them, and they aren't even really there or what they seem to be, and yet they seem to be the way they seem to be and seem to be what they are, all of which is just this, which is not limited to actually being any of that in any limiting way.
Yeah, so I mean, you can be where nothing disappears, everything stays
Yeah.
stays solid, painfully so.
Yeah, nothing
But
is
you
negated.
still know what it is.
Yeah, nothing is negated, but what this is transcends, it is transcendental and transcends all of its apparent specifics, which aren't, and all the apparent specifics aren't actually anything other than this that is transcendental. But there's no tension between those two, from the point of view of verbal statement or human logic, it seems like, well, that's two different things, but it's not actually like that. There's no tension whatsoever. There's no negation or needing to. There's no one and no other. It is just this.
Well, that's what, for me, I was never successful at looking over here, looking away. So what I had to do is I had to notice when I was in the middle of the tornado of angst,
Mm-hmm.
paranoia. That's when I had to see it.
Yeah.
Was that what you're talking about? There's no tension. This is it too.
Yeah, exactly, sure. Because
Yeah.
anything happens in the context of the absolutely transcendental, and the absolutely transcendental is completely explicit. It's not. It's actually completely obvious. So that's why I use this phrase noticing. You notice that's the case, and then it's obvious that it's the case.
So the momentum can continue.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's all equalized. It's
Yeah,
all-
nothing needs to be a certain way or not be a certain way, because it isn't actually that way, even if it seems to be. Because it's actually this.
Nice.
Well, it's convenient. if you're lazy, speaking for myself.
Very good lazy man's way.
Yeah.
Lazy woman's
I just
way.
love the way when you say this, it goes boundless, right?
Yeah, this has a good rebound factor.
I do feel smarter. I notice there's certain things. I get less frustrated. That's what I noticed.
Oh.
'Cause I can see that there are different pathways.
Well, when you play with this stuff, you again, this stuff is pure intelligence by its very nature. It's what it is, and its intelligence, any personal intelligence you may be used to identifying with is just a pale shadow of the intelligence that this is. And so the more one tunes into this, the more one has access to that intelligence, which is infinitely flexible and creative and adaptive and able to, see multiple divergent pathways that can seem to be contradictory, and they can see the ways in which they're not contradictory. I mean, so you basically, your functional intelligence just explodes, and this becomes more or less felt, more or less explicit.
Peter, what is it about you that wears people out?
What is it about you that wears people out, buddy?
Is it like right now is, I don't know, the way I was thinking about what's happening is it's like maybe I'm trying to reduce what's happening down to a seeming, but it's it's very difficult to do.
I don't have any awareness of anything like that, so you need to tell me. If you feel like I wear you out, then you need to tell me why, because I don't know, I have no
Oh,
experience.
but it's like at the Saturday Night Sangha, several people in the group were saying, "Oh yeah, I felt really sleepy around that."
Well, just like going through things like these, yeah. Maybe that's relaxation, or maybe it's the opposite of.
That's our true
Maybe you're really
satsang.
worn out. Maybe you just need a rest.
I'm probably the expert on this.
Yeah, you are.
And what I've found is that
Snormati.
what I found is like this. It's like a sensitivity to Shakti and the level of like presence that you're experiencing a different. Well, in my terms, I'm experiencing a different level of like the level of Peter's conscious understanding, awareness of presence is greater than my conscious awareness of presence, and there's kind of a tuning fork thing that's going on. So my whole energy field is kind of taking in presence at a level that it's not used to, and so it's like kind of lifting weights. And just kind of,
Blows the fuse?
yeah, you get to a point where the weight's too much there. I mean, like I remember during the retreat, I was sitting there, I was contending with the energy that I felt like it was coming at me, and I was like just going back and forth with it and staying with it and I made it through like an entire session, which I mean, in the San Rafael bookstore is like especially hard. And then the next session I was done. I was like I had used every muscle I had. And I was asleep for the afternoon session. But that's what it is to me. It's like you're in the presence of an energy field that's different. I'm in a presence of an energy field that has a different level of conscious awareness of what it is. And my field is beginning to recognize that level just by mere association. And there's only so much that I only have as much capacity as I have to stay with it awake. And so if I go to sleep, it has more play, more room to play.
Then you're off the hook.
Yeah. I don't have to work as hard. It just it'll take what it can take, and what it can't take, it just will slop off. So that's my experience of it. I mean, I'm really, really conscious of it because I mean, I've had a year's worth of sleep.
For me, it's like I'm trying to do a noticing practice around focus, and I can't seem to make any headway if I try to notice, and then it just falls apart.
That's good.
But that's the point. That's the point. There is no focus.
As opposed to the opposite.
That focus is itself a trick of the light. It bootstraps itself up into implication without actually being anything. But everything is like that. Nothing, you've heard me say nothing is resolvable. That's what I mean. Everything is, that's why I call them seemings. Focus seems to be focused, but you look and try and find focus, try and pin it down, and you don't find anything. It still seems to be focused, but you can't find it. And all qualities of the called experiential energy are exactly like that. And when you don't look at them, they seem to be what they are, with enormous elaboration. But when you go investigating it and try and find exactly what's there, you never find anything. It doesn't actually resolve into anything that's coherent. Which doesn't necessarily cancel the phenomena, but the phenomena turns out to be like a mirage. Be a certain way, but when you go to try and find it, there's nothing there. And focus is like that. Focus is really weird. It's a weird phenomenon because it's so obviously, explicit and powerful. But again, try and define it, try and pin it down, try and.
I always like, night, clear night, and you try to look at a faint star and you try and look at it directly, it just seems to disappear.
Yeah.
It's like that. Yeah. You have to look away a little bit
Yeah.
to seem to be there.
Yeah.
It
The
is
less-
there, but
The less closely you look at things, the more explicit and stable and solid they seem to be. When you look closely at anything, it basically disappears. When you look closely at all of this simultaneously, the world disappears. It's a bizarre phenomena, but check it out for yourself.
That happened today. I was teaching. I was doing PE with kindergartners. And there's this, I'm kind of losing my mind, like, they're all running
Herding
all over the
cats?
place. Yeah. Going crazy, hitting the head with the ball, and a frisbee, yeah. And out of all this, there's this one kid. He's sitting on the little 4-square court, and he's doing this meditation. I'm like, what the hell? And we look at each other, and he's like, ah, and I was like, whoa. We both kind of disappeared.
Nice.
And that direct, we really saw each other what this is. And it's like, that lasted for a second, and it was back to craziness.
That's the thing, the craziness doesn't stop. And yeah, the craziness doesn't stop.
No. Craziness and chaos and unresolvability and incoherence is basically all there is. Can seem to be other like that. Other than that is an aspect of the strangeness of this. That this can seem to be coherent, can seem to be solid, can seem to be stable. Is the one of the most miraculous things about it, because it actually isn't. There's so many ways to express the paradox. One of my very favorite ways is everything is exactly precisely the way it is, and you can't find it. You can't find anything. It's exactly what it is, but you can't find it.
Well, that not finding is kind of wonderful.
It's absolutely wonderful. That's what liberation is.
But it seems to you view everything.
Of course, because that's the bottom line.
It views everything with itself. Everything is itself.
And Buddhism rightly made a big fuss about that. Emptiness, self nature, all of this, the one taste. All of that is allusions to this simple, actual condition. And in Buddhism, it's made very central, and that's quite appropriate that it should. Unfortunately, in Buddhism, it's sort of turned into a philosophical absolute rather than a simple empirical obviousness.
Yeah, it reminds me of the wave particle duality again.
It's precisely
the
that.
particle is exactly what it is, and yet this probability wave, you can't say where it is.
Yeah,
until you look at it, and then you
this
see it.
is the physical proof
Yeah,
that this is like that.
yeah, it's both. So you can't say what it is until you focus on it.
Electron's exactly where it seems to be, but until you were looking for it, and then you can't find it.
Yeah.
So the idea of all God all the time, when you say you can't find it, if it's all God all the time, it's just all there is. So
Well, not finding it is finding it. When you find that you can't find it, that's the proof that it's God. If it was just some simple mechanical thing, then you'd find it. But God, by its very nature, is transcendental, which means you can't pin it down. It's unlimited, so you can't limit it by, I mean, finding implies limiting or resolving it or concretizing it into something finite or limited, and it's not. It's not limited. It's just, I mean, I like this word transcendental. It just seems to, you know, it transcends anything you expect to find, to resolve it as. It transcends that. Anything. And yet it's actual. So this isn't just a philosophical notion or a, you know, an intellectual notion. It actually is that. You know, and again, the proof of that is when you go looking for this, you can't find anything. Anything you look for, you can't find. And yet, it's precisely the way it is. And those two are the same thing. You know, again, verbally and in terms of human logic, that seems to be two things, but it's not. It's the same thing. Everything, all specifics are precisely, specifically what they are, and you can't find any of them. Very strange. Transcendental.
It seems to me that the simplest of little loops to go from being frustrated by that to just enjoying it.
Well,
It's the same
exactly.
exact
You're
thing.
frustrated when you still have the fantasy that resolving things would be a good thing and you gain something by it.
Yeah.
But when
Or
you know,
impossible.
when you notice that, it's impossible, and B, you know, well, I think it goes, you know, in terms of unfoldment, it typically goes the other way around. You discover you wouldn't gain anything by it, and then on top of that, you couldn't do it anyway. So it's just a silly nostalgia. It reveals the nature of fantasy.
But it's exactly the same little quality that is in anything that's going on. It's the same quality. It's just a slightly it's almost like the subtlest little kind of little touch that is going from, oh, this doesn't work, it's a problem, to,
Yeah.
well, I don't know what it is, but it's
Yeah,
very cool.
the boundary between samsara and nirvana is not a boundary.
I like the, instead of something is, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Saying maybe right away, it's probability wave.
Yeah, sure. Well, to me, seemings is a really useful notion.
Yeah.
Because it clearly, you know, to me, it very evocatively indicates the sort of mirage-like nature of the presence of as much specificity, as much precision as you care to look for, but the fact that it cannot actually be found, because it seems to be that, but it turns out not actually to be that, without negating the seeming. Why don't we take a 10-minute break?
Who are we waiting to? Jeff?
yes.
Beth?
Is Frank there?
Frank?
Hi, Frank.
Who's Frank? Oh, Frank Sudi?
Yeah.
There may be 10,000 future people there. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or maybe no one. Huh?
Is the sound off?
Can't turn the sound off without stopping the video. The recording is off, the audio recording is off. The video goes in
You're gonna
whole.
say some mean gossip.
It's okay, you're anonymous.
Well, I mean, I just shoot that
Because
one.
your voice is completely unrecognizable.
It's not actionable, so you don't need to worry.
You're anonymous as long as you're not looking at the camera. The fact that they can see you is neither here nor there.
Yeah. Well, 'cause I have that too.
Yeah, they do a potluck too.
There's another difference is, there's that one, and then this one, I've looked at it so much, and I just told my kids, like, after I die, just look up there and I'll be waiting back. Yeah. Yeah, springtime. Yeah.
Do you
No, I'm good. I think I'll take some drugs.
ice cream?
Mm. Yes, I can.
I never know big song. Oh,
Russia.
You were there the other night. And then the tension. Were you there?
Woman in here.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it was 61 in Costa Rica. And it was,
yeah, it is here.
I had a pasta teacher. Yeah.
Group
Now
of
it's kind of reflecting on like the attitude versus like pronunciation. Here
ice cream.
versus like practice and like the
How was Mother's Day, Peter?
Oh, it was wonderful. I don't know if you may have seen it, we posted a nice picture of 3 generations of Brown. It was very sweet.
How you're organized. That's your name.
What a shoe amongst them.
That's your age.
Well, there were shoes off house. Neo hippie.
So how did that, the talk you're giving in London, how did that come about? Was somebody over there helping, like John, did he help pull it together?
Well, actually, Jeff has been doing it remotely. Since I was going to be in London for several days, and since there's a bunch of, at least several people over there that are expressed an interest, I just told them that I'd be over there, and we selected a day and a time and said, in roughly a location, and I'll fine tune the location when I get there. And whoever is able to stop by, it's welcome to do so.
Great.
Those are probably the people who are on the video.
Hopefully, some of them. I'd love to meet Phil.
Yeah, Phil, he's great.
And I know John Leeson is going to come. Apparently, Jeff says he's going to come with some friends or something.
Have you got a number? How many?
Small.
Letting go of what I think it is. I also live a very simple life.
Whereas nowadays,
They could probably find a really good Indian restaurant. London's supposed to have the best Indian food. Anyway.
Well, we'll certainly do that when we're there.
Yeah.
I think the meeting will probably just be in the hotel bar or something.
Oh,
That'll be easy.
Yeah.
We're staying in kind of a fun hotel in Soho, apparently, so we're doing it at an off hour, so the bar shouldn't be completely crowded. And I think it's only gonna be a handful of people. Don't know.
That's great.
As always, we'll see what happens.
You know.
whatever I can do, yeah.
I didn't do that one, but I've done other retreats. Yeah, I did like 10 or 12.
You left out, flying on a magic carpet.
Oh, yeah, I did that too, yeah. But I did, yes, I did forget that.
It's not just like I've been totally, completely gripped by the like intense.
Or flying in full lotus. Just like flying through the air.
Go out of So,
What am I
Yeah, all
flying?
kinds of like really bizarre stuff.
I practice, I look out the window, and there's a the tallest tree in Kensington, and I just sort of look at it. And I just swear one of these days I'm gonna land there. I'll look way to myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost there, I mean, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
Like
there's
Julian posted something on Facebook, or Jeremy. Would you rather go to a rock concert or fly? Why?
She chose a rock concert.
She chose rock.
Did you ever read The Hitchhiker's Guide?
Yeah.
In there, he says, the way he learned to fly was he had a shopping basket, a shopping bag.
Mhm.
He put one foot in it and put the other foot in it and forgot to fall. And he was flying just by forgetting to fall. I usually fly lying flat on my back.
just on your back and going this way.
I'm not going feet first.
Oh, feet going forward.
I'm usually this high off the ground.
Sleeping position. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I'm very much awake and I'm looking around. I've got my head up and I can see my feet.
I'd say it's probably more like sunbathing, looking at the sea.
No, you're very, I'm very aware
Very
that
parallel.
I'm off the ground.
Right. Oh, yeah, no time, same. I mean, it's just,
You must have,
I can choose to go lucid in my dreams sometimes. And I usually don't choose not to.
So you're aware of the choice?
And that's when I'm lucid, because I am aware of the choice. I'm also, on some level, always aware that I'm dreaming. So Pam, I spent many hours looking at that carving.
Which one?
This car.
Yes.
Is that stork flying towards you or away from you?
Well, now it's flying away from me. I mean, it's flying that way.
It's flying that way, not this way.
Oh,
It can fly either way.
yeah.
It's both.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
I mean, that way.
That's some really good cloud games I'm looking at.
That got my attention.
Didn't get that.
Wakey, wakey. I haven't done a sufficient Pavlovian conditioning on them.
No,
If they were Buddhists, they'd immediately
they'd be here.
start going like this.
I don't think, I don't know.
Is there something to get back to?
I have no idea. It's a BYO situation.
Peter?
Yeah.
I just want to check to see if I'm crazy or not.
Yes.
So it seems like with my path with you has been when I was in the midst of the turmoil and the hardship, I wasn't able to look in another direction. It didn't resolve, but in the middle of that, I would wake up. In the middle of the hardship, I would go, oh my God, this is it too. So the hurricane wouldn't stop. So there was something that I got from you because I couldn't resolve anything. My life stayed hard. Things didn't get better, but I was able to see it in the midst of it. So it didn't resolve and become this calm ocean.
Oh, yeah.
But somehow I was able to wake up in the middle of it. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? What I'm
Of course.
saying?
Absolutely. This is not about changing anything. This is about seeing what it is. And when you see what it is, again, you discover, as you're putting it, waking up in the middle of whatever it seems to be. Which means that even though it seems to be that, you're not actually stuck with that, even though it doesn't go away.
Right.
And even though you may feel stuck with it from time to time. But you can see that more and more clearly. And then you feel less and less stuck. But again, it doesn't necessarily go away or change. This is not about fixing karma. It's about seeing that what it is and seeing that ultimately there is none. But when you see there is no karma, it doesn't stop karma. But you don't need to stop because there isn't any. Because karma is just a seeming. All of this crazy stuff that we struggle with so much as our lives is just a seeming of something that is not that, which is what you really are and what's really going on here. And you come to see that more and more clearly. But again, that doesn't stop the seeming. That doesn't necessarily stop or change what seems to be going on.
So like, I can look out and see reality very clearly. And I still have extreme pain in my body, but
Sure. Why not?
yeah, okay.
It's not, if you want to fix pain, take some aspirin or heroin. If you want to be liberated, see what it is. And the two don't have much to do with each other. I think this is one of the across the board errors in modern spirituality. People approach spirituality as if it's supposed to be an antidote to their circumstances, supposed to improve their lives or improve their personalities or improve something, which is a big mistake because that's not what genuine spirituality is. You can try and do that, but that's in the nature of psychotherapy or conditioning or hypnosis or something. But spirituality is about seeing what it is, what it has always been. It's not about changing anything. But, paradoxically, when you see what it is, you discover deeply that you don't need to change anything. And in fact, that there's nothing to change. Because what's actually here is not actually limited to being what it seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times the pain will go away.
Sure, of course. And I think that can happen too, because the pain isn't actually pain.
Right.
Pain is a seeming, and like with anything, it seems to be the way it seems to be, but when you look at it and try and find it, you can't find anything. So then it's gone. So you can make anything go away simply by trying to find it. But that doesn't make it actually go away because it was never here. And so all you're doing is seeing that it was never here, which is no guarantee that it won't seem to be here at some other time. Because you can't control seemings. Seemings cannot be manipulated. But they're easy to penetrate. Just try and pin them down, and they'll slip. They'll slip right away.
My impression is that if it hurts and you get it to slip away, it still hurts. It's got a different focus.
Yeah, I mean, there's no range, there's no fixity to it or limitation.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen, basically.
Yeah, but
And you never end up anywhere because you're.
I was just thinking of physical pain.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I can make the cause and the everything associated with it disappear, but the pain remains somewhere.
Yeah, and in my experience, pain is kind of flexible. I mean, it can be stronger or
It can-
weaker,
yeah,
or
absolutely.
become transparent and almost disappear, and then come back with a vengeance. And I mean, it's just very unpredictable. It's this sort of dance that it's sort of zooming in and out. But again, this is you're really sort of confusing the issue if you approach this as something that's supposed to fix something in your experience. It's just not about that. But it's actually something that's even better than that.
Well, you realize there's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's liberation.
Yeah, liberation. It's hard to sneeze at liberation when you taste the real thing.
I think a lot of our pain and discomfort, not all of it, but just there's a quality of it that's, how can I say, kind of amplified a lot by what I think is really kind of a fear, a worry that if we don't have something like that, that we sort of want it to keep us here, to keep this notion of us experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to put a similar thing in different terms, but talking about exactly the same issue, nothing to fear but fear itself. It's not a sensation that is the issue. It's the story we have about it that is the issue, and that is the suffering. Pain and difficulty and failure is not the problem. That our story about how bad it is that makes it the actual problem, the actual suffering. The phenomenon itself is just a phenomenon. It's just another energy flavor.
One fellow I knew, kind of interesting guy, did a lot of sort of bootleg sitting practice. Had written on his wall, "Pain is light. Pain is light."
Sure. Yeah.
And, that was interesting for that to be a kind of koan. Sort of, it was its own
Well, it's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I mean, it's a good one, you know. I mean, that's basically sort of, you know, the gist of the approach that I tend to gravitate towards of radiant presence, you know. Everything is radiance. And that is discoverable. That's actually directly discoverable. You know, and saying pain is light is just, you know, saying the same thing. But you don't need to limit it to pain, obviously. Anything whatsoever is light. When you see what experience is, all qualities show up in experience. And when you see what experience is, then obviously all qualities are that. And experience itself is radiant presence. It's this that is here that shows up as radiant qualities. Mm-mm. Master sleep.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Shows up as radiant qualities. Those are the last two words.
He's radiating away over
Yeah, but the power of this, you know, why I call it yoga is it is actually directly discoverable. It's not theoretical or philosophy or something, but if you look at your experience, you can see very clearly exactly what it is that is here and the way that is. And it's the same, whatever the seeming phenomena is, what it actually is always the same. It's always just this presence of qualities, presence of flavors in present, in actuality, in isness, in here-ness, whatever.
It's actually more than that, because you don't have to look. It is universal.
Yeah.
It's just always.
Well, if you want to discover it and prove to yourself that that is the case, then you can look, and
Yeah.
once you discover, then you don't really look anymore. it's hitting you over the head, so to speak.
But it's always the case.
Well, and it's interesting to have that be a focus, an apparent focus, as opposed to looking to see what is not there, you know, and to be looking to see like, oh, it's true here and it's true here and
Yeah.
true here. And
Something is actually here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the big aha.
Yeah.
There is something that is actually here.
Yeah.
You know, wow, there's something here. This is real. This is actual. And so what is it? You know, what in the absolute bare bones, when you get to the absolute basis of it, what is it that is here? What is this that is actual, that is actually here?
And I mean, it seems to me that my experience is that it's circumstantial quite often, that I have to see that again and again in different circumstances in order to see that, you know, as you're using the term, putting the last nail in the coffin, like there's still any possibilities of being alive that are still pulling on me, you know, that I look and say, oh, in fact, no, there's really nothing there.
Yeah. And this is very typical, you know. Usually, you know, like I say, you have to kind of do the math. You have to, you can see it. It's pretty easy to see, but then you have to keep seeing it until you get that there's nothing else than it to see. And that's when you're bulletproof.
Yes. I mean, I enjoyed your talk the other night because one of the people asked you about gratitude. You know, are you grateful? And you were like, no. Are you grateful for your life? Like, no. And I mean, you know, it's true that my experience is really all I have. You know, that's my reality. That's the ego container in a way, and it can't be changed. And it is what it is, and but it isn't what it is either.
Right.
So it's sort of this ironic thing of. You know, I just the way you spoke about that in your own experience was helpful in terms of your life, and that it does unfold in its own way, and it is
absolutely
what it is, and it can't be changed. And yet it isn't what it seems to be.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you really kind of get to see that, it's a wonderful experience.
It's truly wonderful.
And,
It,
it
it,
takes away a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, a lot of
Absolutely.
expectation.
Yeah.
Um,
because it was what it actually is transcendental, and that's explicitly discoverable. And it looks the way it looks, and it keeps looking the way it looks, but it's actually transcendental, which is a vastly different implication and a vastly different flavor than if it was actually just stuck being with what superficially looks like and no more, you know.
yes.
If it was really that,
Yeah.
what a horror that would be.
Yes. Well, and that's what we begin with. We
Yeah.
begin with the
We
belief
think
that
we're
we have this flimsy, you know, superficial experience that doesn't amount to much at all. It amounts to everything. And when we look more and more and see that none of that exists, and you know what we have is real. It's really there. It's tangible. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's just such a huge relief.
Yeah, it is truly. It's so fortunate that this is the way it is,
Yeah.
and that is actually
we can
discoverable.
we can stumble upon that
Yeah.
by
No, it's miraculous.
sitting in places like this. And
Well, who knows how, but
how
by hook or by crook,
Yeah.
somehow it can seem to happen.
Peter, could you talk about the skies opening up? You said that happened to you. There's a part in the Bible where it's like the dove descends on Christ.
Sounds awfully poetic.
When he's so that's a sort of poetic way of saying the same thing, right?
It could be, yeah, sure. It's a similar imagery, I guess.
Right.
So is it like there's just a sense of expansion, or like there's this immediate energy presence that hadn't been noticed before?
Both, and it's not so much expansion, but that what may have previously seemed limited or localized is unlimited and not localized explicitly, which can seem like an opening, although it isn't actually moving from a closeness to an opening so much as a seeing that it never was a closeness. But yeah, and when I saw that, you know, I mean, at one point in my history, I saw that very explicitly and very concretely, you know, basically in an instant, and so it was a very much of a, you know, oh wow, kind of an event. There was actually a bird involved, but we won't go into that.
Oh.
The bird actually flew into a window, so I don't know if that's descending from heaven. I'm not sure it survived the flying into a window, and I'm not sure it had anything to do with this particular experience of mine. But hey, you know, just I don't make the news. I just report it. But you know, it's all of these kinds of narrations of history and all of that is, you know, as interesting or not as they may be, is totally beside the point, because any particular person's experience, or more to the point, any particular person's narrated version of their experience has nothing to do with anything. What's important is your experience, not what anyone else says they experienced.
Well, for me, like when I look for that focus and then I can't find it, and then it just seems like there's this energy presence.
Yeah, there is. And so then once there's an energy presence, then look for that. Check that out. It's like peeling the layers of an onion. Once you see, oh, there's nothing there, then there's another layer. Okay, then peel that one.
I mean,
Keep going.
energy presence is an energy presence.
I'm not saying, I stand mute. Find out for yourself. If there's an energy presence that you think is an energy presence, then look and discover that it isn't. because you can't, because the energy presence that it is, you can't actually find. Anything you can find isn't really there. And so look at what's actually there, and then you won't find what you thought you were looking for. The important thing to find is the not finding. It's not like there's some bottom layer that you get to and you say, now I found it. If you ever get to a bottom layer, you missed the point entirely. When the bottom layer disappears, then you're doing good.
There's not a.
That's the sky opening. Or maybe the ground opening in the case of the bottom layer analogy.
Well, you might find that you enjoy not finding.
You will find you enjoy not finding if you do it well. My experience. That's the whole point of all this. It's the not finding. It's, in a way, it's the ultimate bait and switch, except there's no switch.
You've got the seek and you will not find.
Yeah, exactly. And when you do not find, that's what finding is. Not finding is finding. Try to make sense of that. Try and explain that to your mother.
I tried. It didn't work.
It's easier when they're seven.
Yeah. Well, then they get it.
My mother never went to heaven. She was an atheist.
There he got there.
Or is it they called Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet? The sleeping yogi.
Jeff was preeminent sleeping yogi, really.
Still is.
Yeah. So the more awake you are, the less you get it.
The more awake you are, the more you know there's nothing to get. Which is not quite the same in its import as the less you get it. You get completely that there's nothing to get.
Except there isn't a more awake you are.
No.
Mm.
But there is a more getting that there's nothing to get.
Well, then there's wonder.
There's always wonder.
And enjoyment.
The secret fruits of yoga.
That's true, though. I mean, it's replaced, the seeking is replaced with astonishment.
Yeah, dancing with energy. You know, it can still look like all sorts of personal energies of wanting and not wanting and reacting and all of that, but all of it really just becomes, rather than being explicitly that, it's all just an energy dance. It's just ongoing. And whatever it looks like superficially, it's just a dance of lusciousness. It has no beginning and no end and no goal, and it's all just pure beauty, pure richness.
kind of like watching the weather, watching the. So it's not like the low front is battling with the high front or something like that.
Exactly.
They're just in perfect balance, whatever they
Yeah.
are.
It's a continuum of yin yang dance, unstopping with no beginning, no end, just a continual morphing, continual dynamic equilibrium.
I suppose you could say, okay, well, if you throw an I in there, like I am in the middle of this storm and I might get rained on or house blown away or tornado or something like that. You can make the whole thing up into a good, bad, I like it, I don't, everything comes around that point, that seeming point. But it's just what's going on.
Yeah, and even if it was that, even if it was getting rained on or having your house blown away, that itself is just a continuous flow of energy, dynamic equilibrium, dancing with itself.
Yeah, really, because so all the kind of energies we feel and participate in, like, something important is going on, or I got to vote this way or that, or all of that stuff is really of the same quality.
Absolutely.
Same moving.
Even the most, arguably personalizable aspects of it, anger or reactivity or, feeling affronted or feeling insulted, or all of those are exactly the same thing. They're all these astounding energy vortices that just sort of, come and surge and dance and morph and move into others, and there's nothing but. It doesn't matter what it looks like or what you call it, and calling it anything is doing a disservice to what it actually is, because it isn't actually whatever you're calling it. It's actually this amazing morphing, but it doesn't need to not be any particular way. It doesn't need to not feel personal or not feel like an emotion or not feel like this or that. This doesn't matter, because it's an inviolable purity inherently because of what it is. It's just transcendental energy dance. So how can that be bad? Whatever you call it, how can it be bad?
These energetic presences, they seem to be connected to a bodiness, right?
No, bodiness is just another energetic presence.
Okay, but like
It's just another milieu or gestalt of energy flavors. And you say body presence as if it was a thing or a fixed thing. Body presence is a sea or a wave of feelings that comes and goes and morphs and gets bigger and gets smaller and disappears. And so it's not a thing.
Sure, it's not a thing, but we can talk about an energetic body or.
You can talk about it, but again, look at what you're talking about, and you will find this absolute dynamism and absolute instability. It's not negated. It's not that it's not present. It's just that what is actually present in the way that it's present, qualifying it as being a body or not a body is really arbitrary, because it's just another energy gestalt. It's just like a temperament or a set of inclinations or preferences or something. You can say, argue, well, the qualities of my personality are present, but, describing it in those terms makes it sound like it's something. It is something. Whereas if I look at what I actually mean by the qualities of my personality are present, what I mean is there's a whole symphony of different energies that arise and come and go and dance with each other, and they may have a certain very approximate range of relative similarity over time, but in actual fact, they're always unique and distinct and morphing and changing, and you can't find anything stuck or static there at all. So in that case, where's the personality? It's a phrase for something that is an open-ended, dynamic, never repeating, spontaneous phenomena, and infinitely complex phenomena, just like body identification or anything else. And again, it's a small subsystem in a vast sea of dynamic energy phenomena. So even if there is personality identification or emotional mindset or body identification or whatever, those are, little, you're singling out a tiny subset of in a vast sea of energy presences, if you want to call it that, most of which have absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Most of the energy presences, flavors present in your experiential field have nothing to do with body presence or personality or emotion. They're just weird. You don't know what they are. We don't have language for most of it. I mean, part of the training in this yoga is a kind of a sensitivity training to notice how incredibly broad spectrum the flavors of experiential qualities are, and how the vast majority of it is completely beyond any kind of designation by normal human language. The percentage of things that you could actually assign a word to is minuscule compared to all of these, they're not vague, but they're not discrete enough, and they're not germane to a human physical causal environment. Just these little vibes and flavors and moods and, zings and insights and all of that, which are just, they're so amorphous and so, non-physical reality oriented, you might say, but they're present and they're vast. They're, the most, like 90, it's like the fabled, 90% of the iceberg that's underwater. Most of your experience is actually like that. And if you sort of take an inventory of the full field of your experiential presence, you'll discover most of it is this sort of no man's land, off the map kind of stuff that just is you can't talk about it or think about it because it's just too weird. It's too ephemeral. It's too, it's not. It's too thingy. And then once you develop enough sensitivity to notice the way that's actually the case, then you look at things you can talk about, like body identification, your personality, or your, anything like that, and you discover how small and minuscule it is by comparison to this vast sea of actual experience, non-thinking, of actual experiential qualities that are present. I mean, this is my experience, look for yourself, maybe your experience is different. Maybe your body identification and your personality are really big and none of this stuff is there. Hey, what do I know? Maybe it's all just me.
Well, it's certainly useful to experiment with that and see how it turns out.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting is, check it out.
Yeah.
Look at your experience skeptically and without preconceptions, without an expectation of what you're going to find.
Good luck with that.
Well, yeah.
That's the whole point of it.
But if you look, one thing is for sure, you will discover that there are vast ways in which it's not like what you're used to thinking of it as being. And that's the whole point. Because right away you're open to newness, you're open to otherness, you're open to, possibility beyond what you thought you were and what you thought you were stuck in, if anything.
whatever reason, there seems to be certain times or instances where it's more noticeable.
Oh, absolutely.
There's one example I can think of. There's this person at work at a particular site I go to, and my like their energy, whatever they put out, like it just kind of scares me.
Mhm.
I'm kind of like, shit, don't go near this person. They're like tough.
Mhm.
Yeah, like a wall. And so it like short circuits my interpretive faculties,
Mhm.
like because whatever that person outputs, I'm kind of like it kind of throws me off.
Mhm.
So I don't know, it's interesting to notice that.
Yeah. But, in the course of this yoga, you take advantage of seemingly empirically useful conditions. And don't worry too much about conditions that seem to be less useful, just sort of bypass them or weather them. So, the way I've often put it in the past is do noticing when it's easy, and don't beat your head against trying to do noticing when it's not easy. Because it's not like you need to do it all the time. Anytime you do a good noticing, it will have the power of deconstructing your normalcy, your habitual frame of reference, and it will cumulatively build on previous noticings and be a new benchmark on which future noticings will build. So any noticing builds. It's not like you need to do it and maintain it. Anytime you do that, it's like jumping a quantum level, and so it's cumulative. So it's relatively easy in this yoga. You only need to do it occasionally, and it's still powerful. So it's intrinsically very efficient.
I thought that it's like having frequent flyer miles that never expire.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't need to be booking a flight every day, but when you do book a flight, it's there for you.
Yes, exactly. They can build up seemingly without any flying.
Yeah.
That's sort of interesting because I was thinking about the story of what it was, the being thrown off that made me notice, but actually maybe it sort of both. Well, one example I've been thinking about is, I have a hearing aid, so I obviously don't wear them, and when I'm sleeping, and then in the morning I'm just sort of laying awake and everything is sort of muffled. And the only time I've really noticed that was there's these goddamn birds outside that are so loud they even penetrate, without the hearing aid. I said, well, that's odd. I haven't really heard that. And my son doesn't like the birds either. They would wake us up at 5:30 in the morning, But those kind of things. Well, of course, taking drugs or something, or altering your consciousness, all those things can, I don't know which goes first, the chicken or the egg.
Well, you can't say. The very nature of noticing is irrational, and it's not the result of process.
Right.
It's not something you can do on demand, and it's not something you can say how you did it or what you did when you're doing it.
Right.
It's just a weird kind of
Yeah, it's sort of like the trickster you were talking about.
Yeah.
It just comes and does it.
It's a condition that can occur and that you can take advantage of if you have the wherewithal to it's like catching a wave and surfing it.
Right. I think that's what's the interesting part is about it, as continuing this kind of practice is you can build up the skill to take advantage of what's coming your way.
And you can't say how you do build up that skill or how you do take advantage, because that's irrational too. So you sort of learn how to do it without ever knowing how it is you're doing it. But still in all, you can.
Are you listening to this, Gavin? Does it help me?
That's good.
We're not going to give you any manual.
That's a good one.
You gotta do it yourself. Good thing we don't have to pay you any money, Peter, that's all. I had to do it all myself, I mean.
Hey, I agree. Good God, if this is,
I would suggest you pay by results.
I would,
By results.
yeah,
Thanks for a great job.
yeah.
you're the only one that's actually paying anything with your effort.
Congrats.
So thinking a certain way may or may not be useful,
Right,
but there's no way to prove that, so.
right. It's an art, this is an art, not a science.
Yeah.
It's not a technology, it's an art. And so you learn how to do it by learning how to do it. And you can't say or prove, you can't say how you're doing it, and you can't even prove that you are doing it. But nonetheless, you can do it.
That's so true.
And failure might be the most efficient.
Absolutely, failure can be a very powerful technique. You can use anything. And I mean, I would say in human terms, failure is much more useful spiritually than success. Because success generally seems to be something and supports the idea that there is something, or, you know, to some degree, whereas in failure, it's like, what? Where am I? What's going on? What am I doing? It's all, everything falls apart into question marks, which is a truer stance. Should bring your CPAP machine to these events.
Yeah.
Can you say that any point of focus includes all possible points of focus?
Yes.
Anywhere you look is everything?
Yes. You can say that. You can say that quite meaningfully. Anything contains everything.
That's because nothing can be pinned down.
I wouldn't say that's because, but that reveals the fallacy of focus, because you focus on any particular thing and you realize you're focused on everything. So so in what sense is it actually a focus? It's a paradox. It seems to be a focus, but it's not actually a focus.
Since it never departs from itself, it's never finding anything but itself.
Yeah.
So it's all one
Exactly,
substance, so to speak.
exactly.
Yeah, so anything you look at, you're really seeing all of it, because
Yeah.
that's all it is all of it.
Yeah, because it's not the sum of,
Yeah.
it's not a sum of pieces.
Yes.
It's
There are no
all,
pieces.
it's all it, and
Yes.
it may seem to present as pieces, but you can't find any actual
No,
pieces,
yeah, exactly.
even if it seems like that.
Yeah.
So there ceases to be an anxiety about not getting it, or,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, because there's nothing to not get,
Yeah.
Yeah.
nothing to not
That's
get or
everything, not
get.
getting not everything.
It's very helpful, just like.
No, it's a real load off.
Yeah.
Well, there is a little sadness or something sometimes that doubt comes up. I mean, I don't know where that doubt comes from, but I mean, it's palpable, it's real.
Sure, but that's part of your energy dance. And again, depending on where you are in your unfoldment,
Mm-hmm.
it's either a real doubt, or it's a echo of a doubt, or it's a doubt-like flavor of transcendence, and so on and so forth.
It's a shadow, it's a shadow of your former self.
Yeah.
Must be a song in there.
Chase that shadow.
A doubt-like flavor of transcendence.
That's what
I can hear Frank Sinatra singing.
Yeah.
That's what was so good
I
about
was
the
thinking of actually the
Thomas.
Peanuts cartoon with the two
Oh,
of you.
Peanuts. Oh, Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
What did you say about the caterpillar? The caterpillar is what the butterfly looks like.
Yeah.
So doubt is what enlightenment looks like at that moment.
Yeah, of course. Anything is what enlightenment looks like at that moment, because there's nothing else here. And it can look like anything, but it isn't actually limited to being what it seems to be. But what it seems to be isn't limited to being what it seems to be, because if you actually look closely at what it seems to be, you won't find it. The only way the whole thing can seem to unravel is if you don't look closely. Then what it seems to be can seem to be actually that, and no more. But after you train yourself into how to look closely, you don't even need to look closely anymore, because you see that all looking is actually looking closely, and everything is just this continual morphing fuzzy weirdness.
I was thinking, my knee-jerk reflex is always to go back alone, there to be alone. And then I was just sort of saying that, like, how could that possibly even be, a thought? Because everything is always there, it's always present. So how can you find, poor me alone, in anything like that? It's just completely ridiculous.
There would have to be a you separate from something else to be alone.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing just falls apart.
But I mean, it's interesting because that's the flavor that, has, stayed with me through my whole life. Sure. From my childhood all the way through, is this me again, but actually when you look closely at that and you see that that's just the nature of reality.
Yeah.
And that it's everything.
Yeah.
Then it just kind of deactivates the whole.
Yeah, exactly.
whole-
So.
I mean, I love saying that, in different situations that you can just completely just wipe out a whole lifetime of assumption.
Yeah.
Just in one moment.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like what we were talking about a while ago, where each energy system, each being has their own kind of karmic bias or their own personality bias, or the issues that sort of become a running theme, more or less, in terms of one's obsessions over the things that one tunes into. And as you say, every one of these, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. In that case, I mean, that's a particular theme or argument, and again, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But no theme stands up to scrutiny, because all of these themes are predicated on conditions or things or entities that are juxtaposed a certain way or what have you, and nothing like that can actually be found. Failure or success or aloneness or dependency or this or that or the other, whatever sort of dominant karmic theme that the personality orients to, when you go actually looking for what, can you actually find anything like that in reality? It just doesn't, it's not there. It doesn't stand up, doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
In fact, when that energetic presence appears, that I see more and more that it's, it's just sort of the gong, the supreme.
Yeah. It doesn't need to, it doesn't need to not be there. It doesn't need to not feel like that, because it just doesn't matter.
It's just the reframing of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that over the years with various obsessions. Just
Sure.
saying that they're in fact, they're just more material for noticing. And
Totally.
for enlightenment, for real presence.
Yeah, it's all.
And then they just dissolve. They don't appear again.
Yeah.
Because they're not, they're no longer needed or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. It's all of these obsessions are just, a particular interface mode of radiance, and and it doesn't need to not look like that.
Right.
Everyone's personality has its own quirkiness and its own, biases or obsessions or, kinkiness or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't matter, because all of that is just, the interface with the radiance, with the transcendental. Right. So it doesn't need to not be like that. It doesn't need to go away, because it isn't what it pretends to be.
Right.
So it doesn't need to not be that, because it isn't that. Well, it is. It's really awesome. I mean, it's very easy in spirituality to have the naive notion, I have to fix my personality and erase the ego and become a no one, and then I can, I can be reality. But that's a complete fallacy. It's entirely absurd. Nothing needs to change at all, because you already are transcendental. You already are not you, so you don't need to not be you.
Exactly. I like that. The word identity is very good, because the whole thing of identity says ID, point to something.
Yeah.
But since the whole thing is always the whole thing, there's nothing to point to.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even have a concept. Identity just goes out the window.
Yeah.
Identity doesn't even hold.
Yeah. Well, identity is based ultimately on the notion of identify, to designate.
Yes.
And as soon as you designate something, that only holds up if there is something to designate.
Right.
And anything you designate, if you look at what's actually there, you find something that completely transcends the terms in which you're designating it. So like personality, personality, my personality, great, okay. Look at what that notion actually refers to, and you find this infinite hurricane of weird flavors. And so in what way is that a personality?
Yeah.
It's just never-ending, non-repeating, spontaneous, transcendental weirdness. So where'd the personality go?
Oh, it's there.
Technical term.
New business card.
Wonderful.
You know, this noticing stuff, you know, it's whatever that is has this. I think in comparison to it, all these notions that we maybe used to hold just get thinner and thinner. They just get like gauze, and then, you know, they blow away. You don't even notice.
Yeah, they just become more and more irrelevant.
Yeah.
And then whether they're there or not is irrelevant. The whole thing's just irrelevant. I mean, you know, the thing that's really lost in spiritual unfoldment is self-importance, or ultimately any importance, which boils down to self-importance. Because any importance is only important if it's important to me. Because I'm important and I matter. But all of that just is what, you know? It's so obviously absurd.
But the self doesn't disappear.
No, it doesn't disappear, but it doesn't need to, because it's just a euphemism for this radiant presence. You know, I mean, a lot of traditions very, I think very meaningfully and very potently just refer to realization as self-realization, because you realize the self, the actuality of the self. The self, when you're looking for the self, you find this. So this is the self, you know, inclusive and transcendental. That's just, you know, that's as good a way of putting it as any.
But what about that which recognizes the self as it is?
But there's no that and this, it's all just this.
No, who else wants it?
The self recognizes the self as the self, and you're looking for the self, you can't find it. So it disappears up its own asshole, I guess you could say.
That's a good way.
Metaphorically speaking.
There's a technical term again.
It's always there.
Yeah, it's not always there. This is always there.
This is always there.
Yes.
Which is a recognition of this.
Yes, this recognizes itself, and it's always here.
And that's maybe sometimes what we mistake for those other things,
As identity.
because they're kind of pinned together, or they can be.
Presence is only present because presence recognizes itself. If presence wasn't recognized, it wouldn't exist. It's in the perception of presence that it is actual, and what perceives presence is presence. So there's no other mechanism. Presence isn't actually seeing itself in a mirror. It's just recognizing itself without mechanism.
Right.
Presence knows presence because it's present, and it happens to know itself.
But that can happen in any way too.
Well, it can't not happen.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's the constant,
That's what's here.
and it can look like anything, but it's always, you know, I mean, we have all these notions like awareness and consciousness and all that, but when you're looking for awareness and consciousness, you don't actually find anything. All they refer to is the inherent potency, which you can't find either, but the inherent potency of this that is here, this presence. The nature of it is such that it knows itself, it perceives itself, it actualizes itself as this actuality right here, without any extra or external mechanism.
That's very.
And it's all miraculous, and you know, the fantasy is that there's mechanism. There's a self over here that's seeing it over there, and all of that imaginary projected structure, you know, complicates the issue, or would complicate the issue if it was actual and was findable. But of course, it isn't. It is neither. The only thing you actually find is this itself. You know, so if you want to argue that this is recognizing itself, okay, fine, argue it all you want, but you still won't find anything beyond the bare fact of this. So it's all an in-house job, so to speak. Another BYO situation.
It collapses into infinite explosion. It just collapses into an infinite explosion.
Yeah, sure, without any collapse.
Yeah. It goes it's implosion to explosion.
All right. Written time. It's Miller time, folks.
Okay.
Are we heading to the pub?
Say
Like
Barbie.
the day, the old.
We should get him in practice
night.
for going to England.
Yeah.